Hello everyone, this is Niranjan Navalgund for chess.com, and today I'm very happy to cover an amazing win by Deepan Chakkravarthy over none other than Hikaru Nakamura. So let's get straight into the game. This was from the title Tuesday, and Deepan played e4, and then Hikaru Nakamura obtained the hybrid version of hippopotamus, philidor, pirk, whatever you call it. You see, after knight c3, d6, bishop e3, a6, a4, b6, g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, knight d7, and if you go by the trend of what's happening so far, then e6, knight e7 is something that I was expecting. But after knight e2, Hikaru Nakamura went for e5. So now it's not clear if we can call this a pure hippopotamus, because the pawn is on e5, and there's also h6, g5 inserted sometimes, but now there is a pawn break. So since this is a pawn break, I can say that it's also having flavors of philidor. But let's look at how Deepan responds. He plays castles, and after knight gf6, he goes h3 to not allow any knight g4 ideas. And after castles, he plays g4. So when I looked at this game, what I was reminded of was this Karpov's game, in which he also used to employ this line. For example, after e4 d6, d4 knight f6, knight c3 g6, I have seen that sometimes he has employed g3 bg2 knight e2 kind of setup. So it's an interesting one. It's a slow and steady way of playing against these modern or prick defenses. Let's get back to the game. After we got knight e2, knight f6, h3, he played castles, and now he got g4. Now after g4, Hikaru Nakamura played pawn to b5. Now, when you look at it for the first time, you see that okay, the pawn on b5 is hanging, but he has a point. If you take on b5, like ab5, and then if you take knight b5, there is a pawn hanging, which is a central pawn. You can take with knight b5 or bishop e4. And white would not really like to give his center pawn. But after b5, Deepan played g5. So instead of trying to defend this e4 pawn, he went for counter attack, which is the best move in the position. And now, not only the pawn on b5 remains to be under attack, the knight on f6 is attacked, and it has to move by force. You can't really play b4, because then he will take the knight first and attack your bishop. But when he takes this knight, there is no piece to attack, only a pawn, so this is not really possible. So after g5, he played knight h5. Objectively, this position is still okay, and the pawn sacrifice that black played with b5 is still fine, because he has some compensation. You can see that the pawn has come to g5. It is likely to become weak in the later stages. So after knight h5, Deepan Chakkravarthy took ab5, and he took knight b5. Now after this position, after knight b5, the rooks are sharing the files, but after knight b5, black just captured the rook on a1, and after queen takes a1, this is a critical position, because I think after this move of Hikaru Nakamura, Deepan Chakkravarthy not only was a pawn up, but he was even pressing for more than an advantage. So in this position, maybe you can take a moment to figure out what you would do as black. It's a very strategical moment, and if you don't play this move as black, you are likely to go down. So in this position, Hikaru Nakamura played bishop to c6. Now the drawback of this move, which I always tell, that always notice the drawback of your opponent's last move, is that the a6 square is no longer under black's control. That allows move like queen a6. Also, white can play knight a7 and attack this bishop, and then put this pawn to d5. So there are different options that white has at his disposal after black plays bishop c6. But black should have taken e takes d4. Why? Bishop d4 is not possible, because you see the pawn is hanging, and this is a very important pawn, because if you take queen g5 and after bishop g7, he has bishop e4. So the king is in danger in this variation. So even after you play f3, knight g7, fe4, this knight hangs. So all these complications are in black's favor. That is the reason why bishop d4 is not coming. So how about knight bd4? If you play knight bd4, black will play queen e7 and attack this pawn on e4. And now if you think of a move like knight c3 to defend against this, then black has bishop takes d4, and then this is also falling. So he can play something like maybe knight f4, then queen g5. So all these complications are actually favoring black because of the king's position. Because white has played this g4 g5 expansion, he's paying the price in these variations. So ed4 was very necessary. Like let's say after ed4, even if you take knight ed4, then black will still play queen e7, and then also if you defend this pawn once, he will attack it again with knight c5. A move like f3 is not something that white would love to play, because this position looks very shaky. After knight b6, knight is coming to c4, you can see the king, and this bishop is not a good side. So considering all these things, he should have played ed4, but Nakamura played bishop c6, and then after that Deepan went with queen a6, and after knight b6 he was able to spot that after de5 he is able to win a pawn. Maybe you can think for a moment if there is a way to win a pawn. Okay, so in this position knight c7 wins a pawn to certain extent. I mean, it looks like white is just winning a pawn straight away, but he has to be precise in the variations he's playing. The best move objectively is to prevent any play, counterplay, and just play b3. You will notice the y of it very soon. Why b3? Now after knight c7, queen c7, Deepan went with queen takes b6, but bishop b6 was necessary. After queen b6, black has queen b6, bishop b6, and rook b8, and now this pawn on b2 falls. So I hope it is now clear why I mentioned b3 initially, because after white plays b3, there's very little that black can try to do. White can slowly improve c4, he can get his knight to c3. So it is only white who has a lot of potential for immediate improvement, but black's pieces are making it difficult for him to improve any further. So in this position, maybe b3 is a nice move to keep pressure, but knight c7 is fine as well. But it's important that white continues with bishop b6, because then there is no pawn falling and white is a steady pawn up. But he went with queen b6, and it allows a simple way for black to get the pawn on b2, which he did not. I can understand, maybe Hikaru wanted to retain queens, like they say, if you're down in material, don't exchange. But in a short time control like this, in Title Tuesday, such things do happen. He played queen c8, he retained the queens, and after rook d1, new move, new piece, bring the rook to the open file. He has done that. The pawn is attacked, so he plays king h2. These moves are very easy to make, but after queen takes c2, I think rook d7 was also possible here. Like if it takes queen takes e2, then you can play something like bishop c5, and the pressure is there. Like if you move the rook, let's say, to e8, there is rook d8. There's all kinds of mating threats already, and it's difficult to be black in this position. But he went rook d2. He wants to first attack the queen, and after queen c8 he played queen c5. I understand this decision because it's very human to exchange queens when you're up in material. White is a pawn up, and that too an outside pawn. So this pawn has a lot of potential. So if the queens are off, then the win becomes much easy. I understand that. So bishop e6 happened. He took queen takes c8, rook takes c8, and now I like b4 here to push the pawn, because this is a passed pawn. Why not push? Why not just push it? But he played h4 here. In this position, it's not the best move, but it has its own ideas. I like the idea, but the move could have been better. The idea of h4 is to exchange this bishop off, because this bishop is not really having scope. So Deepan wants to just play bishop h3 and exchange this bishop off, and keep keep the game going with good pieces with himself. But after rook b8, he got bishop h3, which is fine. And now I think bishop into h3 he should have done. He should have done this, and then maybe f5. White remains to be better because he's a pawn up, but that was the way to go forward. But after bishop c4, bishop g4, this is completely gone, because the knight on h5 cannot do anything. It cannot move anywhere. But at the same time, it's also paving way for the ruin of pawn structure. For example, after bishop f8, this bishop h5, the pawn structure is ruined, and this f5 square is forever in white's control. He got knight g3, attacking the pawn on h5, and after bishop b4 he played rook c2, bishop d3, rook on the 7th rank, very normal, and after bishop f8 he played bishop c5. I like this move, even exchanging this, because this is the only defender. If this rook goes to b2, then there's always rook c8 tricks, and this is making things simple. So when you're low on time, it's better to have positions in which there are simple moves available to you. So exchanging of pieces can eliminate all possible counter plays in the long run. So I like this decision. And after bishop c5, rook c5, rook b2, here is a puzzle for you. It's white to play and checkmate. It's not every day that you get to checkmate Hikaru Nakamura, so I would consider that this was a very special day for Deepan, who was able to play rook g8 check, knight h5, knight f5 check, and then rook g8 mate. It's important that you don't play knight h5, because then that will be a mate in 6, like something like this. It will go on, and then you play king g3. This is the mate. But why do we have to do that? Just knight f5, and then after king g8, he delivered the final blow with rook g8 checkmate. So that was his game. Congratulations to Deepan. When I asked him about the game, he said that such things are normal in a shorter time control. Even the big or the top players, they lose. So he was very modest about his win. But I feel that the win is big, because beating Hikaru Nakamura is not an easy task. It's super fast, and I'm very happy that we got to do a game of him. And he was also part of the Chessophile show that I did with him and Grandmaster Stanny. So also check out that video of the Chessophile show, where he was also very good with the puzzle battle, and no, not puzzle battle, I mean he was good with the chess variants. You can look at the puzzle battle portion also. And I also did pose him some interesting questions. So if you are into chess trivia, puzzles and tactics and some chit chat, I think you must definitely check out the Chessophile show with Deepan I did. And that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back soon. Bye bye.